Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Dmitry Bivol was in action this past weekend, and he secured the W, ho-hum victory against a ho-hum opponent, and now what he's hoping for is that an Artur Beterbiev unification match can happen in 2022. According to Bivol, there is a good chance the two of them could collide in the spring if a deal can be reached between their teams. Of course I want to fight Beterbiev. This fight could happen in the spring. I'm ready for big challenges. We were ready to fight any of the champions to win another title. If the fight with Beterbiev is organized, it will be great, Bivol told TASS. I want to wish Artur good luck in the fight with Marcus Brown, and then we will see what will happen. Both Beterbiev and Bivol have been inactive in the last few years.
Artur is supposed to be fighting Marcus Brown this Friday.
Marcus Brown, his mandatory challenger. By way of the WBC, Marcus Brown, former U.S. Olympian Marcus Brown, whose team expressed an interest in facing Artur Beterbiev, and it seems they've made good on their word because that's what's about to happen.
I don't like Marcus's chances in that fight.
Just being honest, I think that Marcus is a well-schooled boxer, but Marcus Brown has been accused of not taking the best punch in the past. Couple that with what is arguably the biggest puncher in the division opposite the ring of him, and it creates a situation to where even if Marcus Brown weren't a chinny guy,
Even if he weren't chinny, Artur's the biggest puncher in this division.
even if he weren't chinny, he's dealing with a fighter, a champion, a unified champion, who's got a 100% knockout percentage.
I mean, if it ain't your chin or the lack thereof, it's his power you gotta consider.
So provided that Artur Beterbiev makes it through that Marcus Brown fight the way I think he can, the way I think he will, Dmitry Bivol and unifying with him, that is on the docket. That is on the horizon. Dmitry is expressing an interest in fighting him in the spring of next year. Dmitry, who last I checked was a Matchroom fighter, even though his last fight wasn't on a Matchroom show.
The fight was shown here in America on DAZN.
That communicates to me is that, at least for that fight, Matchroom was still in the picture, though the registered promoter for the fight was not Eddie Hearn, was not Matchroom, it was German Titov.
Over there in Russia.
I've seen a sentiment expressed in some circles that Eddie Hearn hasn't really made any big things happen for Dmitry Bivol as of yet, since having signed that fighter well over a year ago. His relationship with Matchroom hasn't resulted in very much.
Really hasn't had a big fight yet.
This Saturday, Mexico's own Zurdo Ramirez is going to be vying to become Dmitry's mandatory challenger by taking on Unieski Gonzalez in what is a WBA eliminator.
Bivol versus Ramirez would be a bigger fight than any fight Dimitri's had so far.
That's not saying that Dmitry Bivol's body of work so far is lacking. That's not saying that Dmitry Bivol's resume is thin, that he hasn't fought solid fighters. He's fought solid fighters, but what he hasn't had is a big fight. A fight with Zurdo would be a bigger fight than any fight that he's had so far, and a fight with Artur would be an even bigger fight than that. The fight with Artur that he's talking about, the fight with Artur that he's looking for.
Can that fight happen?
I think it can. I don't know what Artur Beterbiev's standing with Top Rank will be after this Friday night's fight with Marcus Brown. Artur Beterbiev has been with Top Rank for a little over 2 years now. He signed to them back in February of 2019, and he's fought 2 or 3 times under the promotional banner. He had the Kolajdzic fight, then the Vozdik unification match.
2 fights here stateside.
His last fight earlier this year wasn't here stateside. It wasn't in America. It was over there in Moscow, Russia, against Adam Dionys.
Not exactly a Top Rank show.
That wasn't a Top Rank card, though we did see the fight here stateside by way of ESPN Plus, who Top Rank has a deal with. And essentially what that means is that Artur Beterbiev has fought 3 times, gotten out there 3 times since signing to Top Rank, and you don't get the sense that he's a big part of their bottom line. You don't get the sense that Artur is a guy that sells a ton of tickets for Top Rank.
Bob wanted to match him against Joe when Joe picked up the WBO title.
But Joe Smith Jr. and his people, they had other plans, and we've talked about those plans several times here on the channel. Plans that have since changed, though all the same, they don't seem to include Artur Beterbiev, at least not for the next 2 fights. So where does that leave Artur? If he makes it past Marcus...
Top Rank might as well let him go over there to DAZN and unify with Dmitry.
Because I don't think the people over there at Top Rank want to have to pay Dmitry Bivol an arm and a leg to cross over to their side of things and do the fight. I don't get the sense that Top Rank wants to pay an arm and a leg to do that fight themselves. Perhaps they will employ a similar strategy to the strategy they employed with...
Do you remember when they let Jose Ramirez cross over to DAZN for 1 fight?
So that he could unify titles with Maurice Hooker on the Matchroom DAZN side of things. The way that broke down, the fight meant more to Matchroom than it did to Top Rank, and as a result of that, Top Rank let their champion go over there, make a career-high purse, and unify 2 titles. At the same time, perhaps they will employ...
Perhaps they'll do the same thing with Artur.
Their other guy, Joe Smith Jr., he's fighting Callum Johnson, and if he wins that fight, he's supposed to be fighting Anthony Yard afterwards. He's going to be booked for at least the next 2 fights, if he stays a champion. So where does that leave Artur?
Artur, whose career's been riddled with inactivity.
Promotional issues, injuries, from fighting to get away from Ivan Michel, who Artur felt wasn't keeping him active enough, to landing on the Top Rank side of things, having only fought 3 times in the last 2, going on 3 years.
Just about 2 going on 3 years.
The way things have been carrying on, Artur Beterbiev has been a sparsely active fighter for one reason or another, and it's hard to classify it as bad promotion when it looks more like bad luck. He wanted to get away from Ivan Michel, and he did. He goes over to Top Rank. He has 2 fights, unifies titles. The pandemic hits. It slows down.
Yeah, that sucked all the air out of the room for Artur.
You know, it's not that they weren't keeping him busy. He was supposed to be facing his IBF mandatory challenger, Men Fanglong, over there in China. But the Chinese investors pulled the funding from the fight, so they defaulted. The rights for the fight ended up going to Top Rank as the pandemic hit and everything was being shut down worldwide. Artur Beterbiev didn't fight at all in 2020. He was supposed to fight Men Fanglong. That didn't happen. Men Fanglong turned into Adam Dionise, who he was supposed to have fought late last year in December, but as a result of suffering a broken rib, the fight got pushed back, pushed into this year, earlier this year. And he did finally get around to fighting that guy. But you see what I mean when I say that this guy's career has been riddled with inactivity for one reason or another. He's been sparsely active.
So I don't get the sense that he's some big ticket seller for Top Rank.
I don't get the sense that he's a big part of their bottom line, and if he's not going to be unifying with Joe Smith Jr. anywhere inside of the next 2 fights, why not let him cross over to the Matchroom DAZN side of things to participate in a unification match?
Dimitri says he wants it.
And Artur, he's not getting any younger. That guy's pushing 40. I understand that he's a consummate professional who takes good care of himself, though all things considered, Father Time waits for no man, not even Artur Beterbiev, and it's about time that he be involved in a big fight, another big fight, what would arguably be the biggest fight of his career against Dimitri Bivol.
Make the fight.
Other news, Badu Jack is very eager to secure a cruiserweight title shot. Badu Jack has been bestowed an honorary golden visa in the UAE, one that is given to celebrities, major investors, and high-profile individuals. Dubai is my second home, and I love it here, Jack stated. We are looking to make some big moves in the Middle East, and it's been great so far. We've had first-class treatment here in Dubai, head coach Jonathan Banks said. The preparation has been nothing short of amazing. It's everything you want to have in your camp. Our hosts at 5 Palm Jumeirah have been amazing. This is the best hotel in Dubai, and they rolled out the red carpet for us. We can't wait to come back here and do it again. With the recent news of Canelo Alvarez stepping up to cruiserweight to challenge WBC champion Lunga Makabu, the possibility of an Alvarez versus Jack showdown is openly welcomed by Team Jack. Everything is possible, and if that fight ever happened, we'd love to do that fight in the Middle East with our partners here, where the sand is plentiful and so is the money. There's a lot of long money out there in the UAE.
But I don't think Jack's gonna get the chance to fight Canelo, I don't.
A title shot, however, at some point seems a little bit more realistic. Badu Jack, who is ranked number 3 with the WBA, number 7 with the WBO, and number 8 with the WBC.
He's really a ways out from fighting for the green belt or the brown one.
Could be some time before he's in position to challenge for either the WBC title or the WBO title as a mandatory challenger, though not so much with the WBA, the black and gold belt. Badu Jack ranks in at number 3 by way of the WBA. He's a lot closer to a title shot with them than anyone else. Badu isn't ranked at all with the IBF.
Arslan Goulemarian is the WBA Cruiserweight Champion.
Arslan Goulemarian of France, who was supposed to be in action this past weekend against Igorov, but ended up pulling out of that fight
because he tested positive for COVID-19.
And at this time, I don't know if they're going to reschedule that Igorov fight for sometime next year, or if Arslan Goulemarian will be allowed to move into something else. A unification match with WBO champion Lawrence Okoli, perhaps?
Eddie Hearn on Instagram said that that's somebody that they're looking at.
I guess that things aren't working out between Team Okoli and Team Breedis. Talks for a unification match between those two champions seems to have fizzled out. Not that long ago, Eddie Hearn expressed an interest by way of Instagram, matching Lawrence Okolie against the winner of
Goulemarian versus Igorov.
But as stated, that fight didn't happen. The reigning champion, Arslan Goulemarian, ended up pulling out of this fight this past weekend. So you have to wonder, next year, will he go straight into a Lawrence Okolie unification match, or will they reschedule the Igorov fight?
And the way that relates to Badu Jack is he's rated pretty high with the WBA.
Badu Jack, who I think is an excellent fighter, a 2-division champion aspiring to become a 3-division champion here in the cruiserweight division. He's given us some excellent fights the last couple of years. The James DeGale fight at super middleweight.
Good fight.
The Marcus Brown and Pascal fights at light heavyweight. He has since moved up, already started his campaign as a cruiserweight, and I'll tell you that depending what champion ends up opposite the ring of him becoming a world champion isn't far-fetched, or at least not as far-fetched as Adrian Broner picking up a title, or David Lemieux picking up a title, you understand?
It's not outside the realm of possibility.
Not completely. I'd have to say that Badu Jack stands a better chance of becoming a world champion again at cruiserweight than, say, Adrian Broner does at either junior welterweight or welterweight. I'd have to say that Badu Jack stands a better chance of becoming a champion at cruiserweight than, say, David Lemieux does at super middleweight. But yes,
It might be very difficult.
though not impossible. It all depends on what champion Badu Jack has to go through in order to get to an alphabet title. And you'll notice that Badu Jack ranks in at number 3 by way of the WBA.
Arslan Goulemarian's cruiserweight WBA champion.
Arslan Goulemarian, who's not the most physically imposing cruiserweight champion out there, or the most active. Arslan stands in at a very modest 6'1", and he hasn't had a fight since 2019. This past weekend's fight, if he would have had it, would have been his first fight in a very long time. Arslan is trained by none other than Abel Simchez. I know that many of you out there may not have the highest opinion of Abel Simchez's abilities as a trainer, but need I remind you that he did used to train unified cruiserweight champion Murat Gassiev, and Murat Gassiev was one of the more formidable cruiserweight champions this division has seen in a very long time. Just back to the point, given that Arslan Goulemarian isn't really the most physically imposing cruiserweight champion out there,
Not busy.
sparsely active, I'd have to say that Badu Jack stands a better chance of winning a title from him than, say, Mayris Briedis, this division's ranked number 1 cruiserweight champion, the very statuesque Lawrence Okolie.
Lunga Makabu, he's spoken for.
If he beats the Biso Muchunu in their rematch early next year, he's going straight into that Canelo Alvarez fight. So out of the 3 available cruiserweight champions that are out there, I'd have to say Badu Jack stands the best chance of winning a title from Arslan Goulemarian than the other guys.
Relatively speaking, of course.
Arslan Goulemarian doesn't appear to be with any major promotional outfit, any major network. Thus, there are no network and promotional politics to have to work around. And given that Badu Jack is now based out of the UAE, his UAE buddies might be able to put together an offer to bring Arslan Goulemarian to Dubai in order to stage a title fight over there sometime next year. Yeah, I could see that happening.
At minimum, it's possible.
They're going to reschedule that Igorov fight? I don't know. Is Arslan going to move into something else altogether? Maybe a unification match with Lawrence Okolie? Or is he going to keep his schedule free? I don't know. But it's not outside the realm of possibility that Badu Jack in the near future could challenge for that WBA title. Finally, on the heels of his latest victory, Naoya Inoue says, if unifications don't happen, I'll think about going to super bantamweight. Inoue had to work harder than expected and was shocked at Depien's ability to take his shots. He used to be a Muay Thai fighter, and he brought that toughness, Inoue said. I started to wonder whether my punches were having an effect. That's how tough he was. The fight didn't go as everyone was expecting, but it was a good fight in Japan after 2 years.
It had been a while since Naoya had fought in his native Japan.
Inoue would now like to unify more titles in his weight class. He hopes to secure fights with WBC champion Nonito Donaire and WBO belt holder John Real Casimero. Last Saturday, Donaire knocked out Raymar Caballo and expressed his interest in facing Inoue in a unification match, what would be a rematch between them.
Drama Insight Tama too.
Casemiro was set to face mandatory challenger Paul Butler last Saturday in Dubai, but he was forced to withdraw due to medical reasons. Their fight was postponed to next year. There is a possibility that Casemiro will be stripped as the sanctioning body wants medical records to substantiate his illness. If no unification is secured, then Inoue will move up to Super Bantamweight. I've been placing a lot of importance on unifying the four belts, but if the individual fights don't happen, I'll start thinking about the Super Bantamweight titles, Inoue said. I feel like the likeliest unification match for Naoya Inoue at this time is the Nonito Donaire fight, because Nonito Donaire,
wants it too.
upon dispatching Ray Marcaballo, his WBC mandatory challenger, he mentioned Inoue by name, and Inoue himself, he still has unifications on the brain. With John Riel Casemiro, there is instability, and we've talked about that.
Though it's the idea of Inoue moving up that has my attention.
If Inoue were to move up to 122 pounds at some point next year, I don't think he'd have access to Stephen Fulton. Stephen Fulton, unified champion Stephen Fulton, who fights under the PBC banner. Good fighter that he might be, having already expressed an interest in facing Naoya Inoue. If he were to move up, that's all well and good.
Politics would prevent that fight from happening.
Inoue versus Akhmadaliev seems like a more realistic fight to me. MJ Akhmadaliev, the other unified champion at Super Bantamweight, who fights on the Matchroom DAZN side of things, I think Inoue would sooner be granted access to him than Stephen Fulton, and if I'm being honest,
It's a winnable fight for Naoya Inoue.
MJ is on the smaller end of the spectrum as far as Super Bantamweights go, and while he can punch, he's not the biggest puncher at the weight.
It's not so physically imposing that he'd be too big for Inoue or too durable.
Though we really aren't there yet to where Naoya Inoue is effectively moving up to the Super Bantamweight division. Though if I had to guess what would happen if he did, I believe we'd sooner see Inoue versus Akhmadaliev before we'd see Inoue versus Fulton.
I'm not sure we're ever going to see Fulton versus Akhmadaliev, let alone Fulton versus Inoue.
Hey, blame it on the politics of boxing, but I'm not holding my breath to see those fights.